Every writer in Hollywood spent the first 6 months of 2026 whispering the same sentence into the same expensive dinners, and the sentence was that 50 Cent could only ever sell one story. One franchise. One universe. One autobiography stretched thin across 4 spin-offs and dressed up as a television empire. That was the quiet consensus moving through the agencies, and the consensus was designed to hold 50 Cent inside a small, comfortable, profitable little box. And then, on July 31, 2026, 50 Cent walked out onto a soundstage in Louisiana, opened a door nobody in that room had even noticed was standing there, and stepped through it. And when 50 Cent stepped through, the entire map of premium television changed shape overnight. That is the real story, and that is the story nobody on this platform is telling correctly. Every recap channel is chasing the wrong headline. Every gossip page is chasing the wrong feud. Every entertainment blog is staring at the loud thing on the surface, and completely missing the quiet machine running underneath. Because what 50 Cent did in the summer of 2026 was not a television premiere. What 50 Cent did was a jailbreak. And the walls that came down that night were walls Hollywood had spent almost a decade building, brick by brick, around a single name. So understand exactly where 50 Cent was standing at the beginning of that year, because the starting position is what makes the escape so violent. On the surface, the position looked like total victory. Power, the original series 50 Cent built alongside Courtney Kemp back when Starz was still an afterthought on the cable dial, had grown into a full universe of 4 separate shows. Power. Ghost. Raising Cannon. Force. For spin-offs, for writers' rooms, for separate revenue engines running around the clock, around the calendar, around the globe. Global Netflix distribution was already locked and loaded for November 2026, meaning the Power universe was preparing to land in front of 280 million Netflix subscribers who had never once bothered to log into a Starz account. 280 million new pairs of eyes. By any normal scoreboard anybody could point to, 50 Cent had already won, and won decisively. But Hollywood does not run on a normal scoreboard. Hollywood runs on a shadow scoreboard, and the shadow scoreboard was telling a completely different story about 50 Cent that year. The phrase that had begun moving through the agency hallways, whispered in the marble bathrooms of the Beverly Hilton, muttered inside the private dining rooms up in the hills, was a quiet phrase, but the phrase was surgical in its cruelty. One franchise creator. That was the label. One franchise creator. And the logic that pushed the label around town went something like this. Power only worked, the argument said, because Power was autobiographical adjacent. Ghost was 50 Cent's ambition dressed in a suit. Cannon was 50 Cent's childhood dressed in a hoodie. Tommy was 50 Cent's rage dressed in leather. Strip that biography away, the argument continued, and 50 Cent would have nothing left to sell to a studio. 50 Cent was not a showrunner, the argument concluded. 50 Cent was a subject. A very valuable subject, sure, but still a subject. A source of raw material. Not the architect of the machine. And here is the part of this story that nobody on YouTube has said out loud. So pay close attention to what comes next, because what comes next is the whole thing. That narrative was not an accident. That narrative was manufactured. Rival producers benefit enormously when a piece of talent gets locked inside a single lane, and locked talent is cheap talent. Because if the industry has decided that 50 Cent can only make Power, then the industry only ever has to negotiate with 50 Cent about Power. The asking price stays capped. The valuation stays flat. Every pitch meeting begins at a discount. One franchise creator, in other words, is not a description of a person. One franchise creator is a cage with the door propped invitingly open, and the entire industry standing outside that cage was waiting patiently for 50 Cent to walk in voluntarily and call the cage home. Think about how the cage actually works, because the cage has no lock. 50 Cent heard the whispers when television executives said a music artist could not produce premium drama, and Power ran for 6 seasons and birthed a universe. So when the whisper of 2026 arrived, dressed up in agency language and commissary small talk, 50 Cent recognized the whisper instantly, because 50 Cent had been collecting whispers for 20 years, like other people collect trophies. And every single time, 50 Cent did not argue with the whispers. 50 Cent answered the whispers with product. And that is exactly what happened next. The product has a name, and the name does the work all by itself. Fightland. Say the name plainly, because 50 Cent announced the name plainly. Not Power Origins. Not Power Legacy. Not a spin-off, not a prequel, not a legacy sequel, not a shared universe crossover event. Fightland. A boxing crime drama with zero, and the word zero matters more than any other word in this entire video. Zero connection to the Power universe. Zero Power characters. Zero Power cameos. Zero Power mythology to lean on when the story gets tired. 50 Cent deliberately cut the safety net before climbing onto the wire, and 50 Cent did the cutting in public, where everyone could see the scissors. Look at what 50 Cent actually built inside that title. A new cast, headlined by Howard Charles, a classically trained actor with the Royal Shakespeare Company on his resume, not a rapper playing a role, not a celebrity stunt casting designed to juice a premiere weekend. A new world, built around underground fight circuits, unlicensed bouts, backroom betting, the economy of pain that runs underneath sanctioned sport and never shows up on any official broadcast. A new tone, because where Power was about building an empire, Fightland is about surviving a reckoning. Revenge, not expansion. Consequence, not conquest. And 50 Cent, standing over the whole production as executive producer and on-screen presence, planted a flag in the one genre the entire industry had written off, abandoned, and left for dead. Now here is where the separation begins between this channel and every recap channel on the platform, because every recap channel reported the premiere date as trivia, and the premiere date is not trivia. The premiere date is a weapon. July 31st, 2026. Midsummer. The dead zone of the television calendar, the stretch of the year when the streamers hold their prestige releases back for fall awards season, when the networks run reruns, when every critic in America is sitting at a desk with nothing serious to review and nothing serious to write. Every competitor looked at that slot on the calendar and saw a graveyard. 50 Cent looked at that same slot and saw an empty highway. Because understand what the dead zone actually means for a premiere. Zero competition for attention. Zero prestige releases fighting for the same headlines. Every culture writer with an empty column and a deadline. Every algorithm starving for a fresh story to push. Every group chat looking for something to argue about. A normal show premiering in October is one voice in a stadium full of screaming voices. Fightland premiering on July 31st is the only voice in the building. 50 Cent did not pick a week date. 50 Cent picked a date where the entire attention economy had no choice but to look in one direction, and 50 Cent was already standing in that direction holding a premiere. And notice where Fightland lives, because the address is part of the message. Starz. The same network Hollywood said 50 Cent should have outgrown. The same network rival executives whispered was holding 50 Cent back, too small for the ambition, too narrow for the vision. The smart play, according to the whispers, was to take the Power success and shop it to the biggest bidder, to chase the Netflix money, or the Apple money, or the Amazon money like everyone else in town. 50 Cent did not run from Starz. 50 Cent doubled down on Starz. And the doubling down was not sentiment, because in the 50 Cent playbook loyalty is never sentiment. Loyalty is leverage. Starz gave 50 Cent a home when no one else in premium television would return the phone calls. Starz handed 50 Cent the keys to a network when the rest of the industry was still deciding whether 50 Cent belonged in the building. And now Starz gets the show that proves the entire relationship was never about one franchise, while every network that whispered gets to watch the premiere from the outside. That is not gratitude. That is interest payments on a debt Hollywood forgot it owed. Now comes the question that separates this channel from every recap channel on the platform. And the question is not why boxing is a setting. The question is why boxing is a business. Because once the question gets asked correctly, the entire Fightland announcement stops looking like a creative decision and starts looking like a financial instrument. And that is exactly what the announcement always was. Go back a decade and look at what boxing used to be on television. HBO boxing was a cathedral. Mayweather, Pacquiao, Cotto, De La Hoya. Premium cable built entire subscription quarters around Saturday night fights. A single Mayweather pay-per-view could pull in more money in one evening than most cable shows earned in a full season, and the whole industry understood that boxing was not a sport on television. Boxing was a money printer with gloves on. Then the money moved. Mayweather retired into exhibition economics, where the checks got bigger and the stakes got smaller. HBO exited boxing entirely in 2018, walked away from the sport after 45 years, and left the cathedral doors swinging open behind them. Streaming fractured whatever audience remained across DAZN, across ESPN, across pay-per-view islands that charged $70 a night and delivered buffering wheels. And here is what got left behind in that stampede. Here is the thing nobody in the bidding war generation bothered to pick up off the floor. A genre with a proven, global, multi-generational audience, and no premium home. Analysts peg the sports drama gap in premium television at roughly $400 million a year in unmet demand. $400 million? Every year. Sitting on the table. Rocky built a 50-year franchise on that demand, 8 films deep and still printing. Creed proved the demand survived into the streaming era, 3 films, a new generation of fans, and a box office run that embarrassed movies with triple the budget. The demand never left. The supply left. And while Netflix and Apple spent 2025 and 2026 fighting billion-dollar bidding wars over Formula One rights and NBA packages, while every conglomerate in Burbank paid retail prices for the same 4 properties everyone else wanted, 50 Cent walked quietly, cheaply, deliberately, into the one sports arena nobody was defending. That is the move underneath the move, so read the move twice. Boxing is not the subject of Fightland. Boxing is the arbitra. 50 Cent is buying a distressed genre at a discount, applying the power production machine to that genre, and relisting that genre on a premium network at full price. Buy low, rebuild, sell high? That is not a television strategy. That is a Wall Street strategy wearing a television costume, and the strategy has a name. Genre arbitra. The same instinct that bought vitamin water at the bottom, while the beverage industry laughed. The same instinct that bought soundstages in Shreveport, while Hollywood fought over parking spaces in Burbank. 50 Cent does not chase expensive things. 50 Cent finds valuable things that everyone else stopped looking at, and 50 Cent buys those things at the exact moment the looking away happens. And understand why the genre fits the man, because the fit is not a coincidence, and the fit is not nostalgia. Boxing is the only sport where the story is never about the team. One fighter. One corner. One walk to the ring under one light with one name on the trunks. Every boxing story ever told is a story about a person the world counted out, standing alone, with nothing left between that person and the verdict except what that person brought into the ring. No teammates to hide behind. No referee to blame for long. No franchise to carry the weight. Sound familiar? 50 Cent did not choose boxing because 50 Cent likes boxing. 50 Cent chose boxing because boxing is the only genre where the audience already understands the 50 Cent story before the first line of dialogue gets spoken. The genre does half the storytelling work on arrival. The audience walks in preloaded with the mythology of the counted-out contender, and 50 Cent simply steps into a mythology the audience has believed in for 100 years. That is not casting. That is architecture. Now zoom out, because the timeline is the story. And the timeline is the part of this entire summer that almost nobody has bothered to line up in the correct order. Watch the dates. June 11, 2026, 50 Cent announces Put Me on 50, a talent competition filmed at G-Unit Studios in Shreveport, a pipeline for undiscovered actors, writers, and directors who never have to beg a Hollywood gatekeeper for a first yes. June 18, 1 week later, 50 Cent picks up a shovel and breaks ground on the G-Dome, the centerpiece of a $124 million studio bet on Louisiana soil, a production complex designed to make G-Unit Studios permanently independent of every backlit in California. Same window, Hulu closes a $75 million deal for a 3-part docuseries, telling the 50 Cent story in the words of 50 Cent, the official record, owned and licensed by the subject instead of stolen by the commentators. And then, July 31st, Fightland premieres. 4 moves. 8 weeks. 1 message. Read the 4 moves as a sentence, and the sentence becomes impossible to unsee. Shreveport is the land, sovereign production territory outside the Hollywood gate, dirt that no agency can repossess, and no executive can rezone. The Hulu docuseries is the story, the official record of the life, locked, licensed, and owned by the person who lived it, which means nobody else ever gets to sell the 50 Cent biography back to 50 Cent at a markup. Put Me on 50 is the pipeline, a talent machine that manufactures the next generation without asking permission from the generation currently holding the doors. And Fightland is the proof, a hit built with zero power characters, zero power crutches, zero power safety net, standing alone in the dead zone with nothing to catch it. Land, story, pipeline, proof. 4 words that add up to a single declaration, and the declaration is that 50 Cent no longer needs anything Hollywood controls. That is why the Fightland premiere matters more than the Fightland ratings, and this is the distinction the recap channels will never understand. If Fightland succeeds, 50 Cent walks into every future negotiation as a 2 franchise creator, and the 1 franchise narrative dies in a single night. Every script 50 Cent brings to market from August 2026 forward gets priced differently. The discount disappears. The cap valuation uncaps. Every executive who spent the spring whispering 1 franchise creator gets to spend the fall bidding against the other executives who spent the spring whispering 1 franchise creator. And if Fightland stumbles? 50 Cent still owns the sound stages. 50 Cent still owns the docuseries. 50 Cent still owns the pipeline. The Power Universe still lands on Netflix in November 2026 in front of 280 million subscribers, and the machine keeps running at full speed while the critics write their little obituaries. Heads, 50 Cent wins. Tails, the house loses. That is not a bet. A bet has a losing side. That is architecture, and architecture does not gamble. Architecture just stands there while everyone else figures out what it means. And notice what the architecture does to the people who built the cage. The whisper campaign only works if the whispered about stays nervous. The discount only holds if the discounted stays grateful. The entire pricing mechanism depends on 50 Cent believing that the cage is the safest place to stand, and the entire mechanism collapses the moment 50 Cent builds a second house outside the cage and invites the whole world to the premiere. Nobody in those private dining rooms planned for that. The plan was containment. The plan was a cap valuation and a grateful tenant. The plan did not survive contact with July. Every mogul eventually faces the same test, and the test never arrives with an invitation. Can the machine build something the founder's biography did not write? Jordan faced the test without the Bulls, and the Wizards' years became the permanent footnote every doubter reaches for. Disney faced the test without Walt, and spent 2 decades wandering the wilderness before the machine learned to dream without the dreamer. Tyler Perry faced the test without the dress, and answered with a 250-acre studio and a billion-dollar empire that Hollywood still does not fully understand. The test is the toll booth between being famous and being permanent, and most people who reach the toll booth find a reason to turn around. July 31, 2026 is the night 50 Cent takes the test, on purpose, on camera, on the dead zone day 50 Cent chose personally, in front of every critic, every rival, and every whisperer in town. Cowards take the test in private, where a failure can be buried and a success can be announced later. 50 Cent scheduled the test for prime time. And think about what August 1st looks like if the test gets passed, because the morning after is the actual prize. The morning after a successful Fightland premiere, every agency in town has to update the file. The file that said 1 franchise creator gets shredded, and the new file says something far more expensive. The new file says 50 Cent is a category of 1. Not a rapper who produces. Not a celebrity with a vanity deal. A builder of franchises, plural, a machine that manufactures universes on demand, and machines like that do not get negotiated with. Machines like that get courted. Every pitch meeting that opened at a discount in the spring opens at a premium in the fall. Every executive who capped the valuation spends the rest of the year explaining to a board why the cap got set so low. The repricing happens in a single weekend, and the repricing never reverses. That is what the whisperers actually feared, underneath all the agency language and the commissary casualness. The whisperers never feared power. Power was containable. Power was one lane, one network, one negotiation. What the whisperers feared was exactly what happened. A second flag planted in ground nobody was guarding. Proof that the first flag was not luck, not biography, not a single autobiography mined to exhaustion. 2 franchises means unlimited franchises, because 2 is the number that proves the process is repeatable, and a repeatable process cannot be priced like a lucky accident. A repeatable process gets priced like a factory. And a factory sitting on $124 million of Louisiana dirt, fed by a talent pipeline that answers to no one, documented by a $75 million official record, and distributed into 280 million Netflix homes, is not a television career anymore. That is a sovereign nation with a production schedule. So when the recap channels tell the story of the summer of 2026, the recap channels will talk about premiere numbers and critic scores and social media reactions, and the recap channels will miss the entire point, because the premiere was never the product. The repricing was the product. The premiere was just the receipt. 50 Cent spent 8 weeks and $124 million buying permanent freedom from a label that took Hollywood almost a decade to build, and 50 Cent paid the whole bill with Louisiana dirt, a boxing ring, and a release date everyone else thought was a graveyard. And that brings everything to the only ending this story was ever going to have. Power made 50 Cent famous. Fightland made 50 Cent free. And free men do not renegotiate. Free men rewrite the ring. Sit with those 4 sentences for a moment, because those 4 sentences are the whole summer compressed. Famous is a cage with better furniture. Famous is the industry knowing the name, and capping the price anyway. Free is different. Free is owning the land under the studio. Free is owning the official record of the life. Free is owning the pipeline that finds the next faces. Free is a premiere in the dead zone that turns into the only conversation in the country. 50 Cent spent 20 years being famous, and 50 Cent spent 8 weeks becoming free, and the difference between those 2 conditions is the entire reason this channel exists. The next move is already on the calendar, and the next move is the one nobody is ready for. The G-Dome is not a venue. The G-Dome is not a concert space with a gift shop. The G-Dome is the final piece of the architecture, and what the G-Dome actually is, what the G-Dome actually does to the map of American production, is a story that deserves its own autopsy. The Velvet Wire drops the next mogul autopsy Tuesday, and the next autopsy opens the vault on the night Hollywood tried to freeze 50 Cent out, and the $124 million answer 50 Cent built with Louisiana dirt. Subscribe, or watch the future happen without the future sending an invitation. Comment with the one move from this summer that the comment section thinks matters most, the land, the story, the pipeline, or the proof, because the argument in the comments is half the point. Like the video if the industry cage finally makes sense now. Share the video with the one person who still believes the one franchise whisper. The whisper dies when enough people hear the truth, and the truth just premiered. One last thing before the lights come down. Go back to the sentence that opened this video. Every writer in Hollywood said 50 Cent could only sell one story. Notice what the sentence actually confessed. The writer said sell, not tell. Sell. The industry never doubted that 50 Cent had stories. The industry doubted that anyone would buy a second one, and the industry built an entire pricing structure on that doubt. July 31st, 2026 is the day the doubt got delisted. The one franchise creator now owns 2 franchises, $124 million of sovereign ground, a $75 million official record, a talent pipeline with no gatekeeper, and a distribution runway pointed directly at 280 million Netflix subscribers in November. The cage is still standing in Hollywood, door propped invitingly open, waiting for a tenant who is never coming back. The whisperers can keep the cage. 50 Cent kept everything else. That is the whole story. That is the whole summer. And the summer is only the beginning, because a man who escapes one cage does not go looking for a bigger cage. A man who escapes one cage starts building cities. Tuesday, the vault opens. The Velvet Wire will be there. the Whispers will be watching. And somewhere in Shreveport, on $124 million of Louisiana dirt, the next franchise is already being built by a man Hollywood said could only build one. And before going any further, clear away the lazy version of this story, because the lazy version is everywhere, and the lazy version is wrong. The lazy version says 50 Cent got lucky. The lazy version says Power was a fluke, Fightland was a gamble, and the whole summer was a celebrity throwing money at a wall to see what sticks. The lazy version is what the Whisperers need the public to believe, because the lazy version keeps the cage door open for the next artist. But luck does not file for permits in Louisiana. Luck does not structure a $75 million licensing deal with a streaming platform. Luck does not schedule a premiere into a calendar hole that every competitor ignored. What happened in the summer of 2026 was not luck. What happened was the visible tip of a planning cycle that started years before anyone heard the word Fightland, and the proof is sitting in the public record for anyone willing to read the dates. Go back to Shreveport, because Shreveport is the piece of this puzzle that Hollywood laughed at and Hollywood should have feared. When 50 Cent first planted G-Unit Studios in Louisiana, the industry reaction was a collective shrug wrapped in a smirk. Why Louisiana? The smart people asked. Why not Atlanta, where the infrastructure already exists? Why not Burbank, where the deals get made over lunch? And the answer was sitting in plain sight the whole time. Atlanta is rented. Burbank is rented. Every stage, every lot, every backlit street in those towns belongs to somebody else, and the somebody else can raise the rent, can change the terms, can decide next year that a different tenant fits the brand better. Shreveport is owned. Owned dirt. Owned stages. Owned infrastructure on land that answers to exactly one signature. 50 Cent did not move to Louisiana to save money on tax credits, although the tax credits are real and the savings are massive. 50 Cent moved to Louisiana to remove the landlord from the equation entirely. No landlord means no leverage. No leverage means no cage. That is the detail the recap channel skipped, and that is the detail that makes everything else possible. A showrunner working on rented stages is a guest, and guests get evicted when the relationship sours. A showrunner working on owned ground is a government, and governments do not get evicted. Podcasts monetizing the mythology, while the man who lived the mythology earned nothing from the retelling. The Hulu deal ends that era. The official record now exists, locked, licensed, and owned, which means every future unauthorized version gets measured against the authorized one and found either redundant or actionable. 50 Cent did not sell a life story. 50 Cent foreclosed on everyone else who was renting it. And then the pipeline, because Put Me on 50 is being covered as a feel-good talent show, and the coverage is embarrassing in its laziness. A talent competition filmed at G-Unit Studios is not television content. A talent competition is a staffing agency for a sovereign studio. Every actor who wins, every writer who gets discovered, every director who gets a first shot through that program signs into an ecosystem where the first yes came from 50 Cent, and first yes are the most durable currency in entertainment. Hollywood runs on gatekeepers, on the small group of people who decide who gets to enter. Put Me on 50 is 50 Cent becoming a gate on own ground, with the entire process filmed and monetized as content. The gatekeeper business and the content business fuse into one machine, and the machine lives in Shreveport, outside the reach of every agency in Los Angeles. And there is one more layer underneath all of this, the layer that only becomes visible when the whole summer gets read as a single document instead of 4 separate headlines. Every move 50 Cent made in those 8 weeks closed a different door that Hollywood had been holding open over the 50 Cent career. The network door closed when 50 Cent doubled down on Starz instead of chasing the big streamers, because loyalty converted into leverage, and the leverage is now structural. The landlord door closed when the Shreveport ground turned from stages into a $124 million complex, because owned dirt cannot be threatened. The biography door closed when Hulu paid $75 million for the official record, because the story of the life now answers to the person who lived it. The gatekeeper door closed when Put Me on 50 turned talent discovery into an in-house pipeline, because the next generation now enters through Louisiana instead of Los Angeles. And the genre door, the door the Whisperers thought was the only door that mattered, closed on July 31st when Fightland premiered with zero connection to the universe that was supposed to be the ceiling. 5 doors. 8 weeks. All closed from the inside, by the person the industry assumed was the one being contained. Now consider the timing of the Netflix arrival, because November 2026 is the punchline of the entire operation. The Power Universe lands in front of 280 million subscribers 4 months after Fightland premieres. Read that sequence as a strategist instead of a fan, and the sequence becomes devastating. Fightland proves in July that 50 Cent can build a hit with no power connection. Netflix delivers in November the largest audience the Power Universe has ever touched. Which means the 280 million new viewers meet 50 Cent not as the one franchise creator from the Whisper campaign, but as the 2 franchise architect who just spent the summer proving the Whispers wrong. The Netflix wave does not arrive to introduce a contained talent. The Netflix wave arrives to crown an escaped one. Every one of those new subscribers who falls into the Power Universe in November is a future audience member for whatever 50 Cent builds next, and what 50 Cent builds next will be priced at the post-Fightland rate, not the pre-Fightland discount. The Shadow scoreboard gets overwritten by the biggest distribution event in the history of the franchise. That is the chessboard the Whisperers never saw. While the agencies were busy repeating the label, 50 Cent was sequencing the counterattack so that every piece of evidence would land in the correct order. Proof first, audience second, repricing third. A weaker operator would have taken the Netflix deal and gone quiet, satisfied with the biggest win of the television career. 50 Cent took the Netflix deal, and then spent the summer before it detonating the only narrative that could have capped its value. The November wave was always coming. The summer was about making sure the wave arrived at the right price. And understand the cost of being wrong about 50 Cent, because the town has a 20-year receipt on this exact mistake. Every institution that bet against 50 Cent paid for the bet in a currency that compounded. The labels that hesitated before Get Rich or Die Trying watched the album become a generational document and spent years paying premium rates to work with the artist they almost passed on. The beverage executives who dismissed the vitamin water play watched a $4 billion acquisition mint a check that rewrote what artist equity could mean. The television executives who passed on power watched Starz turn into a destination on the back of the very show they declined. And now the producers, who spent the spring of 2026 whispering one franchise creator, get to spend the following years bidding against each other for access to a 2-franchise machine sitting on own ground with its own talent pipeline and its own distribution runway. The price of the Whisper is about to come due, and the invoice always arrives larger than anyone expects. There is a reason the Whisper campaign failed that has nothing to do with money, and the reason is worth naming before this video ends, because the reason is the actual engine of the entire 50 Cent story. The Whisper campaign assumed that 50 Cent wanted approval. That is the assumption underneath every cage the industry builds. The industry believes, at a cellular level, that talent needs the approval of the town, and that the withholding of approval is the ultimate leverage. Cap the valuation, whisper the label, withhold the respect, and eventually the talent comes to the table grateful for whatever the table offers. That playbook has worked on thousands of careers. The playbook failed on 50 Cent because 50 Cent has never once needed the approval. From the first mixtape to the first album to the first equity stake to the first television pitch, the 50 Cent operating system has run on a single instruction, and the instruction is to build the thing that makes the approval irrelevant. Approval follows proof. It always has. The town did not approve of Get Rich or Die Trying until the numbers arrived. The town did not approve of Vitamin Water until the acquisition closed. The town did not approve of Power until the universe existed. And the town did not approve of a second franchise until July 31st made the approval unnecessary. That is the difference between a star and a sovereign, and the summer of 2026 is the summer the difference became undeniable. A star asks the industry for opportunities and accepts the industry price. A sovereign builds the ground, owns the record, controls the pipeline, and lets the industry apply for access. The Whisperers spent 6 months pricing a star. The person they were pricing had quietly finished becoming a sovereign, and the Fightland premiere was the coronation nobody was invited to attend. There was no announcement of the transformation, no press release declaring independence, no dramatic speech about the industry. There was just a boxing drama, on a dead zone date, on the loyal network, arriving exactly on schedule, doing the one thing a whisper campaign cannot survive: producing proof. And here is the final thing to hold onto, the detail that turns this from a business story into a legend. 50 Cent chose to prove the point with boxing, the loneliest sport in the world. One fighter, one corner, one walk to the ring. No teammates. No substitutions. No clock to run out. A boxer cannot hide a bad night, cannot blame the roster, cannot point at the coaching. The ring is the purest accountability machine in sports, and 50 Cent chose that machine as the vehicle for the most important professional statement of the television career. That choice was not aesthetic. That choice was a message to every whisperer in every private dining room. The message was that 50 Cent was willing to be judged alone, on new ground, with no franchise to catch a stumble, and no biography to excuse a failure. That is the confidence of a person who has already counted the cards. The whisperers offered a cage. 50 Cent offered a ring. And on July 31, 2026, in front of the entire industry, 50 Cent walked into the ring alone and proved that the walk was never the risk. The risk was always belonging to the people standing outside the ring, holding a label that just expired. And for everyone watching this video who is not a television executive, who is not a producer, who will never sit in a pitch meeting on the 50-yard line of a studio lot, understand that this story was never really about television. This story is a blueprint wearing a television costume. The Whisper campaign is not a Hollywood invention. Every industry has one. Every workplace has one. Every field has a quiet consensus about what a person is allowed to become, and the consensus always arrives dressed as a description. One franchise creator. One hit artist. One trick. One lane. The label changes by industry, but the cage is identical, and the mechanics of the escape are identical too. Own the ground. Own the record. Build the pipeline. Prove the second hit on a date everyone else ignored. 50 Cent did not invent this playbook in 2026. 50 Cent has been running this playbook since 2003, and the summer of 2026 is simply the first time the playbook ran with enough money, enough infrastructure, and enough proof behind it that the whole town had to watch the execution in real time. That is why this story matters beyond the entertainment pages. The cage with the open door exists in every field, and the only way out has always been the same. Do not argue with the whispers. Answer the whispers with product. Let the proof do the pricing. The whisperers of the world are counting on argument, because argument keeps the label alive and keeps the debate on their terms. Proof ends the debate permanently, and proof is the only currency the cage cannot counterfeit. 50 Cent spent 20 years learning that lesson in public, and the summer of 2026 is the master class, taught on Own Dirt, broadcast into the dead zone, and priced at the full value the whisperer said would never come. Remember the real headline under the headline. A man the town priced as a single story just sold the town a second one, on the loyal network, in the dead zone, on Own Dirt, with the official record locked and the pipeline running and 280 million Netflix subscribers waiting in November, and the man never raised his voice once, never argued, never begged, never explained, never chased, never flinched, never blinked. Proof over noise. Proof over noise. Proof over noise.